Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of From the Lighthouse. This is Stephanie and I'm here with one of our star ex-students today, the lovely and very talented Suvi Derkenne. Hi Suvi.
Hello.
It's nice to see you again. So you're here to tell us about this super exciting new event series that you're involved in, which is called Generation Women. So what is Generation Women?
So Generation Women is a female-led storytelling evening. It was the brainchild of Australian author Georgia Clark, who's now New York based. Mm-hmm. And the premise is basically getting women of note in the arts and entertainment industry from their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s plus to get together and share a personal story to a live audience on a theme. And after a sellout show in December and being featured in the New York Times, Georgia, I and my other colleague Liv Gorman have decided to set up a Sydney production office. And our first show is coming up in about a week now on March 7th.
That's amazing. So I really love that concept of bringing together women of different ages. I think that's a really interesting kind of way of approaching that. So when is the show and where is the show?
So the show is at the Giant Dwarf Theatre, which is a small theatre in Redfern run by the ABC's Chasers, which is probably a good political environment to start a bit of a feminist revolution.
I love it, yeah.
We kick off at 7:30 p.m. and it's on March 7th.
March 7th, okay. And so where can you buy tickets for that?
At the Giant Dwarf website, which is literally just Googleable Giant Dwarf.
Giant Dwarf, yeah.
You can find us on social media at Gen Women Sydney as well.
So who's involved in this first show in Sydney?
We've got a really good lineup. So the theme is Time's Up, which is in accordance to the Time's Up movement.
Very timely.
We've got actress Chika Igawa, who's an Australian African actress from NIDA. We have poet and author Fiona Wright. We have the literary manager of the Sydney Theatre Company, Polly Rowe. We have Filipino entertainer Lillian De Los Reyes. And we also have a social commentator and journalist Jane Caro.
So that's nice. You've got a really, really nice diversity of voices there.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we really wanted to continue on, which is very prominent in New York, is that it's a conversation across ability, across race, across class, across education, across background, and across age as well. Yeah.
I really like that, across age, because I think, you hear a lot of like young voices, you hear a lot of older women's voices, but I don't necessarily think you get that in between perspective. Yeah. That's super interesting. Who was involved in the New York events? Do you know?
A lot. It's been running for about a year.
Right. Okay.
I mean, in our December show, we had Humanist of the Year Eva Cox.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Speak. We had Melina Marchetta from Alan Brandy.
Yeah.
And the wonderful Nakia Louie, who's currently got her show on again, Black is the New White at the Sydney Theatre Company, and did a very, very funny web series that was shown on the ABC, Kiki and Katie.
Yeah, so some big names there. That's cool. Yeah. So for our listeners out there who might be thinking of coming, why should they come to Generation Women?
Look, it's not a panel event. It's not a didactic event. It's open, it's accessible, and it's entertaining. And I mean, the one thing that really sets us apart is that it's a storytelling evening. And I think that by telling stories, you start changing the actual culture and what's valued. So it is a feminist event, but it's accessible to all. So it's witty, it's wonderful. Come and enjoy a beverage.
Yep.
Bring it into the theatre. And have a laugh. I mean, the last event, all of the audience were like, this is so warm and inviting and special.
Oh, that's really, really nice. Yeah. And especially having all women's voices there, because usually, you'll get a token woman, but you might not necessarily get an all-women panel, will you?
Yeah. And I was talking to Polly just yesterday from the Sydney Theatre Company, And we had a conversation about how, as women, we often feel voiceless. And to be able to stand up there, and it's not, again, it's not a didactic, we're going to speak on a theme, we're going to tell a story, a personal story on a theme, and that's something that doesn't actually happen that often, I feel.
Yeah, or there's the perception that women's stories are only of interest to, you know, other women who've had the same sorts of experiences and are not of interest to, you know, a broad audience. I think there's that siloing of women's voices that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, like, women's novels and women's books, they're presumed to be only of interest to, like, a very small segment of the population. So it's nice to have a kind of more broad spectrum of stories and experiences. It sort of reminds me of The Moth, but more kind of women and feminism specific. Is it similar in format to that?
Yeah, but also just very, very relaxed.
Yeah.
It's you know, a get together, it's having a drink, it's having a laugh, and it's just a shared experience, an act of, you know, it's a galvanizing experience, one of solidarity. And I think that I'm tired of talking about what needs to change, and I think that these sort of events are more of a mobilizing action where change actually happens.
Yeah, and that's really, really interesting at the current moment in time, considering the Time's Up theme and what's going on in the media around sexual harassment and so forth. So it's very, very, very well timed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the post, you know, Weinstein, you know, Trump era of pussy grabbing, I think it's about time the pussy grabbed back.
That's
to be
right.
honest.
I was hoping you would say that because I was about to say it, but then I said, no, I'll let you say it. That's exactly right. Will we be wearing the pussy hats at the event?
You're more than welcome to. I had a conversation with a ticket buyer who rang yesterday and was like, "Can men come to this event?" I said, "Men are more than welcome to come to this event. There will be a lot of pussy in that audience."
Me too. But it's even more important that men come to these events, I think. You know, to hear women's stories and hear what it's like to move through the world as a woman.
Yeah, exactly. We were at a play reading recently for the Catherine McGregor story, which is going to be on later in the year at the Opera House. And there was this point where Catherine talks about the first moment that she actually really felt like a woman. And she was at her local pub and had been there, you know, many, many times as a man when she was still in the army. And this was the first time she was visiting as a trans woman. And walked home and felt afraid.
Isn't that interesting?
And it was just this moment where that really, really sat with me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as women, we're used to feeling that.
Yeah.
It's just something that's there, like this constant kind of low-level anxiety, especially walking at night.
Yeah, and all of the male audience members at this play reading, that really sat with them as well. So I think personal stories like that can actually be more accessible and change people's perspective on something.
Yeah, well, I remember there was a scene, I hesitate to bring up Master of None because of Aziz Ansari's strange kind of place in stories about him have had a strange place in the sort of Me Too movement. But there's a great scene in one of the Master of None episodes, and it's similar to what you describe. It's a woman and a man walking home from a night out at a bar or something, and the man is walking home and like "Don't worry, be happy" is the background music, and he's just walking home and not thinking about anything, and the woman walks home and she's like terrified of this man who seems to be following her, and she's, you know, anxious and clutching her keys and clutching her bag and, you know, walking really fast and getting out her phone and putting 911 in her phone just in case. It's such a beautiful like little contrast in how women walk through the world and how men walk through the world.
I mean, I think there's that quote that I think in this day and age, we're not afraid to raise our daughters like boys. but are we brave enough to raise our sons like our daughters? And I think that that's what Generation Women really is all about, is just having a conversation and bridging in an intergenerational way as well.
Yeah, that's really nice. So what are the plans for this event going forward? Is it a, regular thing? Can people go, how often?
So at the moment we're bi-monthly. So our next show will be in May. But we're hoping to go monthly in Australia. We have some really wonderful names lined up for later in the year. Rachel Griffiths, Michelle Law, who is an up-and-coming Australian playwright who's currently got Single Asian Female on at the Belvoir Theatre. Rosie Batty.
Fantastic,
So it's going to be a good year, I think, and I think it's really time. I think Australia is yet to have its, watershed Weinstein moment. I think a couple of stories are coming out in the press, but defamation laws and issues around that make that really difficult. But more than that, Generation Women is obviously, and even Time's Up, it's bigger than about sexual harassment in the entertainment industry. I think it's, as women, it's about this sort of recognition that we can't go back to being silent and that we need to use our voices. And that's a positive thing as well, and a joyous thing. I don't think any of the issues that are being talked about in the media, all of those hundreds of women on January 1st who started the Time's Up movement, is anything new. I think that we've inherited these issues. And, Hannah Gadsby was recently talking, had an interview with the Sydney Morning Herald where she said something very, very similar about you only have to look at the stories that have been told, from even in paintings, in art, from neoclassicism, the amount of passivity and women lying and sleeping with men watching, and just how dangerous that story is and how ingrained that is in our culture. And I think that, again, the only way to really change that is by telling stories, because stories are accessible, they're entertaining, but they also frame what we value.
Yeah. That just reminded me that, I don't know if you remember the website The Toast, which is sadly closed down now. Mallory Alpert did a great series about, I think she called it Women Listening to Men in classical art. And it was just she just collected portraits of women just sort of sitting there kind of looking unhappy while men kind of talked at them or played music for them, and they just looked so kind of depressed or put upon. And the point that she's obviously making is that women have had to endure and be silent and be good girls and not say, oh, this is annoying me, go away, your attentions are unwanted, or it's actually not cool to watch me sleep, that kind of thing. And it does it comedically, obviously, but so beautifully. It's so clever. Yeah.
No, I think that silencing is something that's not really recognised about how ingrained that is. I've got a very dear friend who's got 3 beautiful, beautiful children, but like all children, have tantrums now and then. And we were coming back from the park, and the little boy, Liam, was having a tantrum and we literally just, was told to run around the park and run it off. But in doing that, his anger and his voice was validated, and his anger was validated and acknowledged. And about a week later, it was the little girl's turn, and she was told, and my friend is a fierce feminist, and was told to go to her room and calm down. And I think that those things aren't thought about because they're so ingrained.
Yeah, and women are supposed to not get angry.
Yeah. So I think that, Generation Women, we're giving complete freedom.
Yeah.
To these wonderful, wonderful ladies to get up on stage and say whatever they want to.
Fantastic.
I mean, like at the last event, there was laughter, there were tears, there was shouting, there was whispering. It was just a floodplain of energy. And I think actually, it was the men in the audience who were probably most engaged, really, by all of that. And it was a political evening, obviously because Eva Cox was there.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
She was very, very fierce.
Yeah,
but
good, great.
But also one that was just so beautiful and entertaining and soothing in a way, actually.
Well, it can be soothing to express all of that, to get it out, to talk about your experiences. It feels like I think it would feel like a burden had been lifted, or a relief in some way.
Yeah, but I also think more than that, in a sense that it was, women supporting women, and women supporting women's voices, and hearing their stories and sharing their stories in such a welcoming and joyous space.
Yeah. Well, you've got me all fired up to come next week. I'm going to wear some kind of feminist t-shirt and find a pink hat that I can wear, and it'll be amazing. So, Suvi, before we go, I want to know about you and what you've been up to. So Suvi was a student here at Macquarie. She did a Bachelor of Arts majoring in English and creative writing, or just English?
Creative writing as well.
Creative writing as well. So you really, really, really loved us, which is great. What have you been up to since you graduated, apart from bringing fabulous feminist events to Australia?
I just finished my Masters of Fine Arts at the National Institute of Dramatic Art.
Congratulations.
In Sydney. Yes, it was a slog. Yeah. 80-hour weeks.
80-hour weeks.
Yeah. NIDA likes to work us hard.
Hang on, is there 80 hours in a week?
Yeah, that's
like doing my maths.
That's what I thought. We were there on weekends.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a radio play coming out this year.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What's that about, and where can we hear
that
it?
That will be on the ABC and hopefully the BBC as well.
What's it called?
It's called Bird Song, and it's being designed, sound designed by the lovely Kingsley Reeve, who did recently the Trees Speak down at the Arts Festival in Perth, which was a really big gathering of Indigenous stories, actually, and they put microphones and speakers in the big park down there with all these, lovely gum trees.
Yeah.
And the trees literally told their stories
at
night with big lighting design, which was beautiful. Got working on a novel as well for Darlie Anderson in the UK. So things in the pipeline. I don't know if the 80 hours are going to slow down.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound like it. Can you tell us anything about the novel, or is it too early?
It's too early. Okay. I think there's been more restartings and swears.
That's normal.
Too many. I was turned away from my local coffee shop.
Because you were typing too angrily or something?
No. Because George said to me, he said, "You've come for too many coffees."
They were concerned about your health.
He was concerned about my health, and the Finnish anger in me came out. I said, "You're just honestly turning away a paying customer, George." And
well, at least you purchased coffees. I mean, it'd be worse if you sat there and you just ordered one coffee for 5 hours.
And then spent their Wi-Fi. No. So
yeah.
I don't think they've got a very good business model.
Yeah, no, you're the perfect customer, because if you have a steady stream of coffees, I mean, maybe you could buy a cake occasionally.
Oh, there was cake involved. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, no. This ration needs coffee and cake.
Well, it sounds like you have an extremely glamorous post-university career.
Yeah. I think it's been blood, sweat and tears. No, but I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have kind of got my foot in the door.
And how did you, turning quickly to advice for other English students coming out of uni, how did you get that foot in the door? Was it through studying at NIDA, or was it networking? What advice would you give?
Well, I think being at Macquarie, that was my foot in the door to NIDA.
Yeah. What a great investment that was. We did not pay Suvi.
you have to work really fucking hard. And there's no easy way around it, and you have to have a thick skin. I mean, I've probably had more rejections for things than being told yes. But I think that, you know, in this day and age, university degrees are more and more becoming commodified. So I think as a student, you have to know what you want and really ask for that and put that work in. And I mean, even being at a creative writing class and having students who haven't done the readings, they used to irritate the shit out of me. If you're going to want to write, read. Yeah. That's
welcome to my life, Suvi.
That's my first bit of advice.
Yes, if you want to write, read.
Yeah.
Love it.
And people are going to tell you no, and you can't do it. And if you work and you put that effort in, it's not luck.
Yeah.
It's really not luck. But in saying that, you have to be a little bit insane.
Well, it's funny, we've recently, you know, done a series of kind of interviews of other students who are now working as writers, as freelance writers or in the publishing industry, and they've all said that about rejection, that it's all about just getting used to rejection and learning to take the blows and not giving up, because you have got rejected. I mean, everyone gets rejected all of the time, and if you packed up tools and went away, you never get anything done. You know, you just have to kind of brush yourself off and give it another go.
Yeah, I mean, even for my interview at NIDA, because it's so competitive, in my course they only accepted 8 students. 8, yeah.
And how many applied?
About over 1,000, I think.
God.
Yeah, and I was told basically by the head of the department, Stephen, that I wasn't going to be accepted during the interview. And I rang later during the day and said, I'm not taking that. I know this course is for me, and I know I want to do it.
Fantastic. And then you got in.
I got in, yeah.
And you were one of the 8.
I was one of the 8. But I think, yeah, I mean, not taking no for an answer is a little different to kind of listening and learning from being told no as well.
Yeah, so knowing when to keep pushing, I suppose.
You're going to have to keep pushing and pushing and be really irritating. There's no other way about it.
So don't be afraid to be irritating. I like that as a message. Yeah. Yeah,
especially as a woman. Don't be afraid to be loud. Don't be afraid to be bold. You know, maybe raise and know and be loud women.
I cannot think of a more beautiful way of ending this conversation than that. So I'm just going to quietly end our conversation because that was so lovely. We're very proud of you, Suvi. And I hope that everybody goes to Generation Women because it sounds like an amazing event. So thank you, Suvi, for coming in to talk to us today.
No, thank you, Stephanie. It was a pleasure.
So this has been another episode of From the Lighthouse. If you could please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, that would be very, very helpful. And please send any feedback or recommendations for future shows our way at fromthelighthouse.org. Thank you. See you in a week. Bye.